So how do you create a repeat pattern the old-fashioned way? Well, today we are going to pull out a square sketchbook. So if you don't have a square sketchbook, then you can chop up a piece of watercolor paper or Bristol board or something like that into a perfect square. But you will need a perfect square to create a repeat pattern. I'm Lauren of Lauren Leslie Studio, and I'm a surface pattern designer and textile designer, so I love creating patterns. And today we're going to be talking about how to create a pattern the traditional way. So if you are using traditional medium such as acrylic paint or gouache or watercolor, then it's ideal to create that on a square piece of paper and scan it in. So let's dive into the video. If you're not following me on Instagram, I'm over at Lauren Leslie Studio, and make sure to hit the bell and subscribe to this channel if you like this video. All right, let's dive in.
So as a first step, I know that I want to use my acrylic paints for the base color. So I'm just gonna put down a layer of gesso because I am gonna be using acrylic paints, and this is watercolor paper. So we want to kind of seal up that first layer, and I'm just using this Liquitex matte medium kind of as a layer of gesso. It's not exactly gesso, but so that the paper doesn't warp, I'm going to clip that down and then just flip my sketchbook over so that the clip doesn't interfere just with this little bottom flap that I have on this bamboo tilted desk, which is really nice. It helps your back kind of stay upright so that you're not totally bending over your paper. So I love that, and it's linked in the description if you want to head over to my resources page over on my website and check out that link. You're welcome to do that. But yeah, this layer of matte medium is just going to kind of seal this layer of watercolor paper because I'm not actually using watercolors in this design. Okay, so now that our paper has that first layer of gesso down, I'm just going ahead and squeezing out these acrylic paints, and I'm just mixing the pink with the white here to get the color that I want for just the background color. So this color is really just going on as a fill, and it is just filling in over the entire page. So I'm just doing one layer first and making sure that I get the paint really even, and it goes on really smooth and nice because I had that first layer of medium down over the watercolor paper. So it's quite sealed up and the paper is not absorbing a ton of water. So that's really helpful when you're using acrylic paint. So what I'm doing next is just moving these clips once the paint has dried so that I make sure I can cover the whole paper, because I'm clipping down my paper just so that the paper doesn't warp or get distorted as it's getting wet. And I won't really have to keep doing that once these initial base layers are dry, but I just want to make sure that this paper is clipped down and really stays put and stays flat as I am applying some wet medium to begin with. So I'm just filling in kind of that white area where those clips were and doing another layer and letting that dry. So now I'm just doing a second layer where I am painting horizontally. The first layer I did kind of vertically, and so I'm just doing a vertical layer, letting that dry, and then doing a horizontal layer and letting that dry. So then I have a really nice base coat of this light pink color before I start doing my design. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and detach my paper from the sketchbook. It is a nice square, and once my base layers are dry, I can remove it from this sketchbook because we will need to chop it up at some point. Not quite yet, but I am going to go ahead and remove it. And the first thing I'm going to do is flip it over to the back side and use a ruler to find the halfway point. This sketchbook is 8 by 8 inches, so I'm just marking it at the 4-inch space on the top and the bottom so that I make sure I get the exact measurements, and of course on the sides as well. So basically I'm just dividing this paper on the back into 4 quadrants. So from there, I'm just going to line up my ruler and divide these lines, and then we will come back to that later. So don't worry about it right at first. We will come back to that in a later step, but it's good to go ahead and have your quadrants mapped out. Once the quadrants are mapped out, I'm going to go ahead and remove my paper from my sketchbook. The acrylic paint kind of got over the over the edge right here, so it's not tearing quite as easily as I would have hoped. So I do have to come back in with my scissors. It started to rip the paper a little bit, and so you might just have to cut it out with scissors, which is also completely fine. Just make sure that you are getting that straight edge and going along the paper. There's nothing here that we can't correct or fix in Photoshop a little bit later, so it's no problem. So you can see here how I have my 4 quadrants, and I just labeled them 1, 2, 3, and 4. From there, I'm just going to flip my paper back over and start drawing my design. This design is a coordinate pattern that goes along with a tiger print, and so I wanted to do just these cute little tiger stripes, very simple. This is going to be a simple design so that you can just kind of understand how to create a repeat pattern the traditional or old-fashioned way. But yeah, in this design, I just wanted to kind of draw some tiger stripes, and I wanted them to have this really beautiful charcoal texture that is difficult to get, this organic, digitally if you're working digitally. So that's one really nice thing about working kind of the old-fashioned way or the traditional way with traditional mediums like charcoal or watercolor or acrylic paint or gouache or whatever it is, whatever your choice of traditional fine art medium is. It is really hard to replicate that 100% when you are working digitally. There are some really amazing digital artists who can get it really close, but for me, it's just a lot easier to do this the traditional way. And so what you want to do when you are creating your design is make sure that you are not going over any of the edges. Right now we just want to fill up this middle area and fill up as much space as possible without going over the edge. If you go over the edge, it's going to mess up your repeat, so don't do that. Just fill in as much area as you can in the middle, and make sure that no motifs, none of your marks go off the edge. Okay, so now I've filled up the page pretty much as I can without going over that edge. And so what I'm going to do now is flip my paper over and bring it over to the chopping block. And of course, you can do this also with scissors or an X-Acto knife if you don't have a paper cutter, but I'm just going to cut this paper along those edges. Okay, now that I have my 4 quadrants, I am simply going to flip diagonally. So I'm going to take quadrant 1 and quadrant 4 and just flip them. So they're just basically exchanging places. And I'm going to do the same thing with quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. They are just going to change places as well. And it's not staying exactly how I want it to because of this angle, but that is how it works. So I'll show you again in just a second with a flatter piece. So to show you one more time from the front side, we are seeing this design that we just created, and we are going to flip 2 and 3, and then we're going to flip 1 and 4. So now you can see how we have kind of this blank empty middle again, and so we are going to fill in the rest of our design here, but of course this paper is still loose, so we need to glue down our paper just to a scrap piece of paper. I'm just using a scrap piece of computer paper to glue down these quadrants in the right space. You can do this with a simple glue stick or whatever you have, but a glue stick works pretty well. Just make sure that you glue all the edges and get it down pretty flat because you want your design to be aligned. So we're doing quadrant 3 first and just making sure that it aligns flat with the paper and gets down pretty nicely. And we just want to line up the edges really, really nice. So we're going to glue all 4 quadrants down to this paper so that we have a solid center that's not going to move around as we're trying to fill in the rest of the drawing. So there goes our last quadrant. We're just going to line it up and make sure it's aligning perfectly, and make sure that you don't get any glue on your hands because that could, kind of mess up the topical surface of your paper. So you don't want to get any glue in the way of what you want to draw next. And I did manage to kind of smudge this charcoal. That's sort of the nature of charcoal, unfortunately. So I'm just cleaning it up with a kneaded eraser really quickly. This will just help me later on. Okay, so now you can see I'm going back in with my charcoal pencil, and I'm just pretending that these lines are not here. We can clean that up in Photoshop later, but yeah, just go over these lines and make sure, in order to create a really seamless repeat, you want to make sure that there are no kind of square lines or tiled lines within your pattern. So you want to make sure that you are going over these lines with the rest of your drawing. So that's why it's important to kind of create these tiger stripes up and down these lines, going across it, going across the vertical line and across the horizontal line as well, so that this design just ends up looking really, really seamless when we bring it into Photoshop. Okay, so now I'm finished with the drawing part, and I'm just filling in these lines once again with my charcoal stick. And I'm getting this really beautiful texture with the charcoal, and it's looking really nice. And again, guys, this is just a simple design. It's just a simple 2-color design, but you could make this a more complicated painting if you wanted to. It's just keeping in mind those edges and making sure that you're not going over that edge in the first section until you flip your quadrants over, and then you can go over the edge and fill in the rest as much as you want, because you know that the other edges line up perfectly together. Okay, so now I've finished filling in the rest of my tiger stripes, and I'm just going to use a little bit of a fixative spray so that these charcoal lines don't smudge. I'm happy with the way it's looking, so this is just going to, this will kind of just hold the charcoal in place so that it doesn't smudge or kind of get dusty or get on my scanner, for example, or on anything else, on my fingers. Now that I'm happy with this design, I can just do this quick spray. And then I'm bringing my design over to my scanner, which is just in the corner on the floor here because there was no space in my office. Actually, there was, but it kept shorting out shorting our breaker, which was really weird. But anyway, I'm putting my design over on the scanner here, and I'm scanning it in at 300 dpi. And then I'm bringing it into Photoshop to finish it up. So if you guys want to see how I finish this up in Photoshop, then leave me a comment below and let me know. But that's basically it. You know, you can scan it in at high res and just clean up the edges in Photoshop, and you're pretty much done. You have a seamless repeat pattern. And you made it the traditional, old-fashioned way, so that's amazing.
Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you got a lot out of it and are excited to create more patterns the old-fashioned way. If you like this channel, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, click the little bell to get notified every time I come out with a new video, and be sure to watch out for new videos from me. I'll see you on the internet. Bye, guys.